This is a very sensitive balance which must be done, especially from from the view of the legal processes, where we are looking at making sure that due process or legality has been followed, but at the same time, we are looking at the sensitive issue of confidentiality, and most importantly, in safeguarding the ultimate is to make sure that we have protected survivor. Hence, in this regard, there is need to have an intricate balance between the legal tension of the natural justice versus safeguarding imperatives. We will have to look at the issues looking at the ad aeternam partem rule, which says that every person has the right to be heard before they can be judged, or they can, you know how in legal terms we say you are innocent until proven guilty. Hence, in this regard, you need to make sure that in normal criminal cases, we'll say someone is innocent, they're entitled to bail and everything. But when we're also looking at the survivor, we must then make sure that we have protected the survivor from this presumably innocent person. These are instances where we might then need to put interim measures, like putting in place an injunction, making sure there's a no contact order between the survivor and the perpetrator. Hence, there is that need to make sure that there is balance. There's also need to make sure that we have internal administrative procedures where we are also affording the perpetrator their right to information. But at the same time, we must make sure that we are balancing that with the need to protect the survivor. We are not, in doing this, we are not giving them everything that they might otherwise have. For instance, the history of the survivor's sexual history, which might be used against them. In also doing this, in as much as natural justice would call upon people to have an open court discussion. In this instance, we need to protect the survivor. Hence, we'll come up with mechanism of having a pre-recorded video as evidence, or to have evidence in camera where the survivor is in another, or to have questions for cross-examination, questions sent to the survivor, and then they screen them against badgering questions or indignified or inhuman questions which are meant to upset the survivor. We must also make sure that there is proportionality in rights balancing, so as to look at the rights of the perpetrator and also look at the rights of the survivor. And those are the issues I've just mentioned, that we screen or we do remote testimony, we do intermediaries and advocates. That is, we also allow for the independent safeguarding officers to and legal support to accompany survivors when they are having hearings. And we also make sure that in cross-examination we have controls to make sure that the survivor is not degraded or subjected to hostility. And we issue interim protective orders, that is pre-hearing injunctions, the legal basis being that we do a non-contact because the survivor might still be badgered by the perpetrator, and we also ensure that interim measures are non-punitive and they are assessed for risk to avoid the long-term effects, because if we just do these things without the balance, if the balance falls in favor too much of the survivor, it might mean that the perpetrator may then sue the institutions and will then expose risk to the institutions. If we also put the balance more in favor of the perpetrator, it means that the survivor or athlete or athlete support personnel may then sue the institution for vicarious liability because the perpetrator might have been someone who is inside. So there is need to walk the line and ensure that there is that balance. And there's also need to look at the issues of confidentiality and privacy and disclosure rules, that we must ensure that there is information compartmentalization. That is, you maintain a strict confidentiality and you only do it on a need to know basis. And you must ensure that there is data protection and statutory compliance we must then make sure that we are navigating regional, national, and international protection laws regarding the handling of sensitive information, such as medical records, minor identities, and psychological reports. We must also ensure that there are exceptions to that confidentiality so as to protect the survivors. For instance, internal confidentiality clauses cannot override national statutory legislation and obligations. And also, we may also not say that those internal disclosure rules will then stop criminal offenses from being reported to the state or to law enforcement authorities. We must ensure that there is public interest and transparency in the managing of all disclosures, and also that, for instance, we must have a database in a country where we put all those previous offenders to ensure that they are then not allowed to be near the vulnerable children or the vulnerable societies. Thank you. Africa stand tall. Africa stand